Hey there, this is Kevin with Project Artemis. Today I'm going to be talking about attacking walls. I'm going to go into some prior lists and older formats that I had some success with, try to explain what the general principles are of the archetype when it comes to deck building, and how to counter the top of the meta and play more of a counter strategy. It's a way that I really enjoy playing the game, and I think it has a lot of potential coming up into the post-rotation format. So to start, we're going to go all the way back to 2020. This is a time when there's a lot of tag teams and VMAXs in the game. The game's really fast, swingy, not the most skill intensive. And to be honest, I wasn't enjoying Pokemon much at the time. So I decided to try something new and play a rogue. As far as I know, this is the first time that somebody had played this Decidueye card to any success. This was a cash tournament back in the online era, and I was able to take the win. This was about 100 people. I was the only one playing this archetype and got first place, which is I think pretty great accomplishment at the time, and it was a lot of fun. So basically this deck was built around this Decidueye card and the Deep Forest Camo ability. This would wall most of the format, which is like the Roblox Pokemon at the time. It was almost indestructible in a lot of matchups, and you would just slowly take your 6 prize cards with a fairly weak attack of Splitting Arrow, but it was strong enough to pressure 1 prizers that would actually be able to damage you. The spread damage was nice also for softening up threats in combination with other bench damage modifiers and damage counter placement. And overall, it's just an incredibly strong card in that particular format. And this was the list. I've got plenty of consistency, got some draw Pokemon to kind of get into the game, bench barrier to protect my own bench, and plenty of supporters to be able to set up and play the game, kind of get your stage 2s out and play. The one matchup where the Decidueye typically or potentially wasn't strong enough was the ADP deck would have maybe one prizer that could knock out your Decidueyes in one hit, which was a big problem. So on the bright side, they were basic Pokemon, and so you could instead wall with this Obstagoon and the Obstruct attack. And the deck looks like a little bit of a pile, kind of a hot mess, playing 2 different stage 2 lines and multiple different energy types. But the reality is you're only picking one wall or the other. It really just depends on the matchup, and you have enough consistency overlap that you can pick one to set up pretty consistently, and then kind of use that for the matchup of your choice that you're dealing with at the time. The thing about Obstagoon is this Obstruct attack, the effect gets nullified if you get pushed to the bench and then gusted back up into the active. And so you really have to manage your scoop of net resources and which Pokemon you put in play on the bench so that you could pick them all up and have only an Obstagoon in play, so that the ADP deck couldn't do any damage to you at all. And that was a fairly reliable win condition in the matchup. A fun alternate win condition that I found was this Fion card, which was essentially a way to avoid ever decking out. And that was really important in the top cut matches where I kept facing Lucario Melmetal, which would reduce all the damage I was doing, so I couldn't take any prizes. They couldn't take any prizes. But if I had this tech to never bench out, eventually they'd run out of cards and I'd win by deck out. And that actually happened every single round in Top Cut, which was pretty entertaining. So all 6 of these games I won by deck out and spamming Fion every turn and doing no damage and just passing over and over again. And ended up winning the several $100s in the cash tournament, which was a pretty cool way to win. I really enjoyed this. Kind of revitalized my love for the game at the time, and it's something I always consider playing over the next year or two if there's ever a time when a meta deck just isn't really jumping out at me or feeling like a really strong play for me in particular, or the competition in a given tournament is expected to be really high, and I want more polarized matchup spread to give me a better chance of winning the tournament. This is something I relied on, and played similar decks in the Players' Cups 2 and 3. Was able to make it into the global finals of Players' Cup 3 using the Decidueye, which was really fun, and had a 14-1 game record in that tournament, mostly by hitting good matchups, but also just knowing the deck and the list very well means you're kind of at an advantage in most games in terms of piloting a given matchup, because you've played it several times if you're doing a significant amount of testing with the deck, whereas decks like this typically are in the 1% to 2% range, and your opponent often is having to figure out the matchup kind of on the fly and is going to be more prone to making mistakes because of that. So the last thing I'll say about this is you kind of have to pick your spots. Eventually, once it was a known quantity, people started teching more for the deck, and it became worse, and kind of goes through its ups and downs. Funny thing can happen though with walls like this is eventually it's not played enough to warrant teching against it, which makes it a good play again. As soon as the techs drop, it becomes a good play. Once the techs come back in because it had a good finish, then it becomes a bad play. And so I think the key is to pick your spots when the counters and the techs are not being played, and you can get a lot of free wins. But it's not the type of deck that you can play all the time and see success with all the time, because the counters exist in the meta. It's just a matter of people commit the deck space to them or not. So while it's a potentially strong strategy, you want to be careful as far as when you actually pick it up. And you can adjust the list a little bit to accommodate for that, but only to a certain extent. Ultimately, you want to be playing this at a time when it's not expected, and that results in less counters being played and more free wins. So moving on to the next type of wall deck. This is from Baltimore. This is a list I played to top 32. Was a really good counter deck. The meta was in an interesting spot coming out of the World Championships, where there's a very clear best deck in Regidrago V-Star. Because of that, decks like Gardevoir that are really hard to wall against were being pushed out of the meta, and the other decks that did well at Worlds were pretty much really aggressive, all basic decks. Roaring Moon was in the finals. More disruptive build. Iron Thorns ended up winning Worlds, and then Miraidon and to a lesser extent Raging Bolt were successful and or heavily played into this meta. And so by countering those specific archetypes, I was able to get a lot of really easy wins this tournament. There were only a couple of matches that were actually close that ended up losing, but most of my wins were very easy in this tournament because this deck wasn't really expected at all. So the main idea here was to use the Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon. This blocks any damage from Pokemon that have abilities. The big ones in that format were Charizard EX and the Regidrago V-Star, to a lesser extent Lugia V-Star. But this, you would just set up 2 or 3 of these with the Fighting Energies and the Turbo Energize. You could use a Rock Chestplate to make it take even less damage from your opponent's weaker attackers. And then the Penny and Scoop Up Cyclone would allow you to heal these and loop them until your opponent just couldn't deal with the Cornerstone Ogerpons anymore. The other part of the deck, this Noivern, the idea is similar to the Obstagoon in the last deck. You would remove all other Pokemon from the board, have only the Noivern in play, and just use Covert Flight over and over again until you take 6 prizes and win the game. A lot of decks have only basic Pokemon. They can't do any damage to a Noivern at all. And because of that, you could just win the game very slowly in these matchups. Now, the caveat to that is similar to the Obstagoon. If it gets pushed to the bench and gusted back up, the effect goes away, and then your Noivern can get KO'd, and then pretty much you're going to lose the game because your deck's slow. It's not doing anything fast. You're not winning a prize trade. You're really dependent on kind of, as long as possible, not getting damaged, or ideally indefinitely you're not getting damaged. So it doesn't matter if you're only doing a little bit of damage each turn. Eventually you'll win by taking your 6 prizes just because they can't deal with the wall. And these 2 walls covered the vast majority of the format and made it a really good play. A couple other little things I'll point out about this is you have the Pidgeot V with Vanishing Wings, similar to the Fion in the last deck. This would allow you to never deck out and not run out of cards, which alternate win conditions can always be useful. Something to think about. This doubled as extra consistency with the Forest Sealstone, and was also never a bench liability. So really synergized well with the rest of this deck. And this deck was pretty easy to play, surprisingly consistent, and really, really strong into the meta. And I think the key to this one was it was completely off the radar, not expected. And so there were pretty much no techs. In day 2, I beat multiple Charizards that didn't play any Canceling Clone or any way to damage the Ogerpon with anything more than a Charmander. So I was able to beat some very strong players there just by having such a good matchup to the point of being almost unlosable. So hopefully there's a tournament next format where the post-rotation walls can be in that good of a meta spot. Another important card here before I move on is the Chorus Tenacity. Lets you search for a stadium, which can be the town store. And this almost acts like a 5th Arven. It's a supporter that I really like in decks like this because it lets you tutor out the specific energy that you need, while also providing access to your tools in the early to mid game, which is really important. The 4 Arven is consistent enough, but this in combination with the Pokegears just gives you that many more chances to get your tools that you need to accelerate energies, to tank, and to draw the cards that you need to play the game. Yeah, this one was a blast. Big fan. And the Blood Moon EX was a fun way to kind of rush the game against Regidrago. And this was kind of an unexpected way to take prizes quickly in the late game, where you'd be trading 2 shots back and forth. This was a close matchup because they could take a 1-shot with Canceling Cologne. But late game, it would come down to 1 turn usually of who could kind of close it out the fastest, and the Blood Moon was really effective at that. So another thing you can think about when you're building these lists is if you have a matchup that is close or even slightly unfavored, tech pretty heavily for that so that you can have as many favorable matchups at the top. What you can't do is try to tech for everything. So there's going to be times where you just have to accept a loss and hope you dodge it, and hope that it's not played heavily enough or successful enough at the top player tables to get in the way of the success of your Rogue Walls deck here. For example, this deck just took a hard loss to Gardevoir EX, but I didn't expect that to be heavily played with it being gatekept by Regidrago. And so rather than trying to tech against it with Lost Cities and that sort of thing, I said I'll just bank on not hitting it. I'm going to make the Regidrago matchup as good as possible. And we're going to take our auto wins and hope for the best. And that ended up being really, really good for this tournament. So moving on to post-rotation format. There was already a Champions League in Japan. This was a 5,000 person tournament, and this Walls deck with Melodic, Farigiraf, and Monkey Dory of all things finished in the top 4. Very, very impressive. A very silly A-spec here too with the Pokevital. Just gives you a big heal to make your walls last longer. And this is overall, I think, pretty well designed list. The Arven engine with the Techno Machine evolution means you can get the wall out in 1 turn. You can do this going first, or on your first turn when you go second. You also have multiple forms of energy acceleration with a lot of Crispins and the Turbo Energize. And then the Monkey Dories will provide both healing and damage modification to potentially accelerate the game. The only thing that I think is really lacking in this list right now is more of these cornerstone overpawns. This card's really important for a couple of key matchups, and I want to lean into that more heavily. So I'm going to make some changes here. I think that depending on if you expect this to be teched against, you can go a couple different ways with the list. So I've got two adjusted versions of this that I think potentially could be good plays. First, we'll go with, this is the most straightforward version, I think, if you don't expect any text. I've kind of slimmed things down, made it a little more straightforward, and worked in some healing cards with the Penny and Professor Turo. With that, we need a little extra recovery, so I've added the Lana's Aid in addition to the Super Rod, so that you can set up multiple attackers with having a big heal at some point, and leaning pretty heavily into the cornerstone overpawns with a 3 count and having 3 fighting energies. So this is so you can reliably set up 2 throughout the course of the game. And with the Hero's Cape, if your opponent has a corner pawn, you can take 2 hits and then potentially play Penny and heal, and that should get you far enough ahead in the prize trade to win that matchup. Similarly, if other decks are trying to 2-shot you, like Frigoraph into the Raging Bolt matchup, for instance, you could get some extra attachments early with the Turbo Energize and your Crispins, and then play a Professor Turo and essentially get a heal that way, so that you can then knock out the Slitherwing and kind of maintain pressure in the prize trade and not lose your Frigorafts to getting knocked out. So a list like this, I think, is a little weaker if people are playing heavy techs. And so if you want to counter the counters, you can work more aggressive Monkey Dory line back in. And this will allow you to heal in combination with the Hero's Cape and even tank 2 to 3 hits, potentially get another penny off, and kind of counter the counters that way. The main way people are countering the cornerstone is to play their own cornerstone, which kind of trades evenly into each other. But if you can heal and tank, then you can deal with that and put yourself in a winning position, despite the fact that they committed cards in their deck kind of to dealing with this type of wall specifically. So similar to the last couple decks, you're basically choosing the wall that disrupts your opponent the most. So for the Terra box, they actually have some non-Terra Pokemon that can hit the Melodic. So I think Frigoraph is the best wall for that matchup. For Dragapult, and if you do face a Charizard deck, the Melodic should be really strong. And then the Cornerstone is really important for a couple of key matchups, like Archaludon. Typically doesn't have a lot of Pokemon that don't play abilities. It's so a very strong wall in that matchup. This deck is actually pretty easy to pilot, and really comes down to picking the right tournament where the meta is unprepared for it. So something I like to do is watch the counts of these cards on Play Limitless and online tournaments in like 1 to 2 weeks leading up to the tournament. If you're at the like 80 to 90% mark of the main expected plays that you expect to face are not playing any techs, that's kind of my cutoff for this. Could be a really, really good play, where if it's maybe 60-40 or 50-50, where a lot of them are playing techs against you, then look into playing a more normal deck for that particular tournament. So coming up for Atlanta and some of the other European events, I will be kind of considering this as an option among many, depending on how the meta is shaping up and what people are expecting the play rate of this wall deck to be. Another thing to keep an eye on is Gardevoir is still seeing some play, and it's really hard to compete with a wall deck, your prize trade is just not going to be very good. And they have ways to get through all of your walls. So if that deck starts to approach, 7% or 9 or 10% play rate, that makes this a much weaker play. But if that deck falls off and doesn't perform, then that kind of boosts walls up by comparison, because you just have less bad matchups that you're trying to avoid. So that's all I have. Feel free to reach out if you have questions on these lists, questions about the archetype in general. You can follow me on Twitter, Krieger TCG. Make sure to follow Project Artemis and all my great teammates. We're working hard to put out good content for you guys. Hoping for some good results into this next format. I think it's going to be a really fun time to be playing competitive Pokemon. Thanks for checking in. See ya.